There's a top 1 to 5% of sales reps that has a process and they're disciplined enough to work it all the time that they don't need help.
Hello Sales Nation and welcome to the Salesman Podcast Live in partnership with HubSpot and recorded at the Leadership Summit in amazing Chicago. On this episode we have Mark Kosoglow. He is the VP of Sales over at Outreach.io. You find out more about Mark over there. And on today's episode, we're diving into how you can build your own personal sales stack. So even if your corporate, the company, the startup, whoever that you work for hasn't provided you with a sales stack, we explain one, what it is, which is the first step, and then two, what we need to implement to have the most success in sales. What software helpers there are essentially to help us on that journey. You can find out more about Mark and everything else that we talk about in the show notes of this episode over at salesmanpodcast.com. With all that said, let's jump right in. Mark, welcome to the Salesman Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Will.
I'm excited to have you on. So we're going to dive into a topic today, which I think there's multiple levels to it. We're going to talk about it from the perspective of the B2B sales professional versus perhaps the sales director, VP of sales, who might have more of a focus on it right now than what the individual contributors do. And that is the sales stack. Yeah. So before we jump too far into tech lingo and and confuse anyone that isn't based in Silicon Valley or in a city like Chicago, New York, London, what is a sales stack?
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned that. I think the first time I ever heard sales stack was about a year and a half ago, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting term. I wonder what it means. But yeah, so it came, actually, in case you don't know, it came from a tech stack that an engineer would use. And so an engineer that's building a product would have this stack, and they have all these different tools that they use, and it's actually like a competitive advantage when you're trying to recruit a developer. And so they just kind of move that language over to sales to say these are the tools that can help a salesperson do a better job and be more effective. So that's the first time I heard about a sales stack, and I think it's a really interesting conversation because sales in and of itself is the same thing it's been since the first time that some guy tried to sell somebody else a rock or whatever it was back in prehistoric time. But I think that the pace and the amount of expectations that salespeople have them on right now are almost unreal. They're almost like impossible. And so if you don't have some kind of superpower or some kind of tool to help you reach it, you're going to be in trouble. And I think that's why we see that nice bell curve. You see the 10% of rock stars, you see the 60 to 70% of people that just are in the middle and aren't hitting quota, but they're not bad enough to fire, and then you got like the tail end of the 10% of people that should be doing something else. But yeah, so I think a sales stack is hopefully the idea is to move more of that middle over to the high-end producer.
So right now where we are in 2017, do we need, and we can define what goes in a sales stack in a second perhaps, but do we need a sales stack if we're in B2B sales? We're primarily communicating over email, text, call, and maybe then moving into an in-person meeting?
In my experience, I'd say there's a top 1 to 5% of sales reps that has a process and they're disciplined enough to work it all the time that they don't need help. They just need nobody to get in their way and just do their thing. The other 95% of us, we need tools to help us. It's like working out. There's that guy that that he doesn't lift weights and he doesn't really run, but like every time you play basketball, he kicks your ass. And every time you play flag football, he scores every touchdown. And then there's the rest of us that need to go to the gym and like drink the protein shakes and we're still no good. And so that's where I think the sales stack is there's a percentage of people that don't need it. It's very small. I think everybody else though needs some tools to help manage all the many things that are going on in sales.
Yeah, let's leverage your kind of background as a practitioner in sales, as a VP of sales. For the people who don't need it, to quote yourself then, would they still improve if they implemented it like further down the line? What I'm getting at is, perhaps we didn't need a sales stack 10 years ago. Will we all need one in 5 years from here?
I think it's more of a question of if it ain't broke, don't break it. And like I would very much think it's a risky endeavor to take a strong producing somebody that's crushing quota and change anything that they do. Now, some of those guys are willing to kind of experiment because they're that good. But like for me, I think that there's just a subset of people that have the people skills and the self-discipline. Really what it comes down to is self-discipline. And the tools help you become more disciplined. But if you are self-disciplined enough to be that successful, I don't think you'll ever need a tool. I think you just kind of have the it factor. You have this certainty about you that people are buying. But I think,
let me just jump in here because now 90% of the audience think I've got the it factor. How again, as a practitioner, how do you differentiate those that 1% to everyone else? Is it Is it as simple as the people who are like doubling up on their targets and really crushing it? Is that all that matters?
Well, I think that is the end result of it, right? That's how you ultimately measure if they have that it factor. But to me, it's more than that. It's when I see a great salesperson, and I'm lucky enough to have 4 really awesome salespeople that I get to work with every day on my team, and these 4 guys crush their quota, but it's more than that. What it is they become entrenched in the sales culture and of what they're selling. So my team sells to salespeople, some guys sell to IT people, but what you do is you somehow become a member of that community, even though you're selling to that community. It's like, being a teacher in a class that's so cool that you actually get to go out and hang out with the students. Now, not endorsing that. That's probably not a wise thing to do, but that's what it is. You have so much. You have the same DNA of the people you're serving that you become part of their community, even though you're serving it and selling to it. So I just don't think that's very easy to do.
Yeah,
So.
well, I guess you've got to have an interest. Like for example, with your guys and girls, you've got to actually care about sales.
Yeah.
Which is the first problem for a lot of salespeople, that it's just a role for them. It's just something that they've. I don't know what percentage, and there's probably data out there that would like enlighten us on this, and you might know this, but there must be a huge percentage of people that fall into sales. They just find it. They don't choose it as a career, as a profession. So that's the first hurdle from like outside looking in at your team. Of they've got to love sales, they've got to love speaking to salespeople, and then that's when you get these ins to the community. That's when you get to become a part of it, and that's perhaps difficult to manage. Not manage, difficult to. You have to hire for that versus kind of implement it.
Yeah, there's 2 things. One is every salesperson stinks, but you stink of one of 2 things. You stink of confidence and certainty, which people buy from, or you stink from desperation. And so it's hard to switch from one to the other. And so like this top 1%, they stink of confidence and certainty, and people are drawn to that. So, that's what you have to do is you have to like change your mindset. I remember for me, I was having a great sales year in one of my first sales jobs, and I'd come into about the middle of the selling season with all of my goals met. So I still had like half the selling season to go. And so I had all these late night appointments all over the place in my territory. And I had a family at the time, and I still love my wife, so I like to be at home, and I love my kids, so I want to be at home, not like trying to escape the house. And so I'm thinking like, man, I'm going to just cancel these appointments. But the people had set the appointments after hours, so I went. But I would get there and I just wouldn't care if I got the deal or not. I would just say, hey, this is what I do. This is how I do it. If you like it, you work with me. If you don't like it, I'm not your guy. Well, guess what happened? Like my win rate skyrocketed. And what it was that certainty and confidence that people were buying. And ever since then, I noticed like I was thinking like desperation before that. I need this deal. I need to feed my family. I need to hit my quota. I need to make my VP love me. I need to do this to advance. And that desperation was just causing people to run from me versus having that stink of confidence. That's the real thing.
Sure, and we touched on this just before we click record here of the podcast sponsorships that we do for the show now. And clearly the audience is now huge, so that makes it easier, and there's more social proof, more videos, all this kind of stuff. But when I first started out, it was far harder to get someone on board because I needed the cash to pay my rent. It was literally as simple as that. But now that we're oversubscribed with inbound, and I get to choose specific companies that I want to work with and that I think I can add the most value to from a return on investment perspective, I pretty much close every call that I get on. And it's not that I've got any better as a salesperson. I'd like to think that some of these conversations have rubbed off at some point. Clearly, there's little point in me doing it otherwise. I'm doing something wrong if that isn't the case. But it's for sure just the confidence in my ability to say, well, okay, fine, you're not a great fit. We don't need to work together.
That's right.
I know my pipeline's big and fat and healthy. But coming back to, and pipelines might come into this in a second, but coming back to the sales stack, are there certain elements of a sales stack that every salesperson should have? I mean, outside looking in, it seems like some kind of email management, or whether it's tracking opens and things of that nature, seems integral at this point. But is there anything else that we need to include in it so that, again, we can, for anyone who doesn't have a sales stack, they can start to perhaps build one themselves?
Yeah, so first of all, I think most companies at least have a scripted process of a series of touch points, or this is how we recommend you either move people through the sales cycle or to get that first meeting. This is kind of how we prescribe that you do it. And I think most salespeople have something similar, like in their mind, like if I could do it ideally.
Is that the problem that's in their mind?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's why I talk about the discipline is the discipline guys not only have it in their mind, they actually do it, or they create a system that allows it. Like for me, before all these tools existed, I had I had 2 clipboards. I had one clipboard that had all the calls I needed to make today, and I had one clipboard for everything I needed to do tomorrow. And so I would like make my 90 calls, and then the ones I didn't get a hold of would go on the clipboard for the next day. And then I would come into the next day with like 2/3 of my calls already decided on. It was easy to decide the other third versus every day trying to remake the wheel. So I think that the first thing that you need isn't necessarily email tracking and all that, because so many tools have that now. It's being able to create a process that you can put yourself on rails. And so most of us don't have the discipline to, when I call somebody and I leave a voicemail, to somehow log in some system that I'm going to do the next step in 2 days. And then when that reminder pops up in 2 days, to actually then do it and then write another reminder again. And if research is suggesting it takes anywhere from 7 to 13 touches to get a meeting. Now, most of us think about that as the initial meeting. I'm telling you, it takes 7 to 13 touches to get any meeting in a sales cycle, it seems like today. But if you can like create that process and then put yourself on rails so that you can do that process with every lead every single time, you're going to be wildly successful. Our research suggests that you can get 20% boost in your results just by using a process, even if it's a crappy one, over and over again, versus this constantly reinventing the wheel, and you don't really know who you're following up with next or how you're going to follow up with, or you have to come up with your follow-up list every morning to get started, which most of us don't, and then you kind of get all off kilter. So I would say that's the first thing, is you got to have something to put your process on rails.
What does that consist of? And I'll just give a plug, and I'll show you here how I go about it. So I use what's called the bullet journal. And I'll link to it in the show notes for everyone rather than kind of going diving into it. But I literally have this moleskin. I have a set of squares in there. It's like squared paper, and I just type a square. Maybe I do it slightly different to the official bullet journal way of going about things. But if I don't get the task done on today's page, I, at the end of the day, will fold it over, write into tomorrow's date, and then I'll copy everything across. And just physically, the laborious task of writing everything across makes me stay in the office for another hour sometimes just to get it done. Because there's 2 things. One, it's almost, there's something going on in your subconscious when you have to write something out over and over and over. Then you're almost telling yourself, I've got to get this done now, because it's becoming a burden. Versus if you don't think about it for 4 days, again, you don't have that process there. Then the flip side of that is, if I've written something in my bullet journal for a week and it's not been done, it's probably not that important. So then I get rid of it. But yeah, are there any other ways to implement this other than kind of that process? Yeah,
So your process relies on one thing to be successful: your discipline. And that's what I'm talking about, is like you actually have the discipline. Like at the end of the day, you'll take that hour and do what it takes to get tomorrow figured out. And I think most salespeople, they're exhausted at the end of the day. They've been driving all around or been on the phone all day, and they're ready to be done, and they just don't take that time. So like one tool is, selfishly, is outreach. So in outreach, you build out your series of touch points. You say, all right, I want to email this person. Then tomorrow I want to call and leave a voicemail. And then later in the day, I want to try calling again, but I'm not going to leave a voicemail because I'm not a stalker this time. And then I want to follow that up with an email a day later and a social touch. And you build out those series of touch points, and then you put the lead into the process, which we call a sequence. And then it just zooms down through the touch points. And on the right day, when the touch point's supposed to happen, you have this pre-populated, this generated list that we provide for you, and you just hammer through your tasks. So like my average salesperson, I think these stats are amazing, is they make 75 dials, they send 165 emails, and they do 30 social touches per day. And we book 1 to 2 cold outbound meetings per day per rep. And these are people that have never heard of us. Sometimes they're not even technology companies. They have no idea what we do. But we have our scripts down, but the main thing is we have the persistence of the process and that discipline of the process that has always made me successful as a salesperson. I'm able to have everybody on my team work in the way that always made me a great salesperson. So I'd say that's the first thing. So that's the engine, right?
And that's just to muse on this for a second, because that gives you data, doesn't it?
Sure.
That otherwise, I've got no data through my bullet journal unless I'm going to go back and reread it all, and I can't read my own handwriting that I wrote down 4 seconds ago during the interview. Never mind what I wrote a week ago. So that gives you clear data to suss out whether those touch points are working, aren't they? And that's got huge value in itself.
Yeah, so you can, our tool will track opened, reply rates, and all that kind of stuff, click-through rates, so that you can see, does really this email work? Because see, one of the other things that salespeople do is they confuse comfort with success. And so they think because they're comfortable doing something that it kicks ass. Well, guess what? It doesn't kick ass unless the numbers say it kicks ass. And since so few reps actually have numbers, they're not quite sure. So we can show people like this email that you think's awesome. Either it is or it's not. But most salespeople I don't think really care about being right. What they care about is making money. And so, but if you show them the data that says this email stinks, they'll do a different version. Or if nobody ever answers the phone between 9 and 11 a.m. in the morning, then don't call then. But you have to have some rails like we've been talking about for your process to help guide you into when to do the best thing and how to do it.
For sure. And I guess, and I don't know if this is intentional or not, but I know when I wake up in the morning and I've got a list of things to do, if I spend 5 minutes on YouTube, or if I spend 2 minutes making a cup of coffee when I should just sit down and work, that list becomes hazy. And then I procrastinate on getting started.
Yeah.
Versus when I've got a strong list that's been dictated to me by some kind of software, data, a higher power that beyond my kind of like puny man brain that's saying go do something else instead, that stops me procrastinating and allows me to get in the flow of things. And by 12 o'clock on one of those days, I've done more than what I'll do by 5 o'clock by the time I've faffed around and procrastinate as well. So I think there's real value in that. So we've got a process in place.
Yeah.
What do we need to stack on top of that to I guess, because a lot of what we're stacking on top of this now is to leverage the process and make that better.
Yeah. So I would consider the process the engine. So an engine needs fuel. And so the fuel of the engine is your data. So do you have great leads and contacts in Salesforce? Do you know how to mine LinkedIn for leads that you can put immediately into your process? Do you have like a great email guessing tool where you need to talk to the VP, but you have no idea what his email address is? Do you have a tool that you can pay for that can say, hey, listen, this is with 80% confidence, this is this guy's email address?
Is there anything you recommend on these fronts?
Yeah, so we use ZoomInfo. I think ZoomInfo is absolutely the best data provider when it comes to direct dials, and I think they're really good with emails too. But you have to buy a subscription, but you can buy it as an individual person and kind of go through and do stuff. We also use Email Hunter. That's a nice one. It just puts a button right on the LinkedIn profile. I can click it and it'll tell me with what degree of confidence that email address is correct that they're guessing it is. And so what that does is it allows for like more rapid prospecting. So it's if like you're talking to a manager and you need to move up to a director or a VP level, you can find that person on LinkedIn, get their title, get all of their information, and put it into your process or your engine. So without a doubt, I'll tell you, you can have an awesome engine, but if you put in crap fuel, it's going to spit and sputter. If you put in great fuel and great leads, and I'm not talking like hot leads, I'm talking like the people, like if there's a VP of sales at a company that should be your customer and they've never heard of you, that's a great lead. They don't have to have downloaded 4 white papers and your marketing department has scored them X number.
That's confidence in your product and service and what we were talking about at the top of the show of just being confident in yourself, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I guess that's less tangible and probably more difficult to throw into software or a sales stack. But I like the way that comes back into the conversation when we're talking about technology.
Yeah. Like when you have a hunch as a sales guy, you got to be able to trust your gut. And like the hunch says, I'm not talking to the right guy. LinkedIn is a powerful tool to find the right person. And then if you have this kind of stack that helps you guess their contact information and all that, and then you put it into your engine, now it's gonna spin off meetings, right? So I would say like that's the fuel of the engine is like your lead data stuff and how you're taking care of getting leads into your system.
So what comes, and let's go through this process then. So you've got the engine, fuel going in. I don't know how to materialize this. Perhaps we've got some kind of exhaust system to get it out.
Yeah.
Is there a tool that is the equivalent of that?
So the way that I look at tools are 2 ways. There's systems of record and systems of action. And I would consider like the exhaust really is kind of like your CRM. Like everything you're doing in your system of action, which is what the process and the engine are, is there. That's where you act. That's where you write the email, where you make the phone call, where you do your research. The rep acts there. What unfortunately a lot of sales leaders do is they try to get Salesforce or their CRM to be the system of action. It's not that. It's just a big database. It's just a big spreadsheet. It's only something where you record things. It's a system of record. And so when you separate those two, what you do is you get a great place where a rep enjoys to act and can act very, in high quantity with high quality. And then you can log all that data in your CRM to kind of see how effective the action that you're taking is. And so I'd say like that's the exhaust is the CRM. Like we work out of accounts and contacts because we think that that's like a very strategic way to look at, hey, we want this account. Do we have it prospected correctly? But all the activity we do, all the opportunities we create, all go into our CRM, and that's what tells us like are there efforts that the engine is doing are working or not. But there's also oil in the engine, right? That's what makes things move smoother. So like
Nice.
Like here's you love this, right? So here's the deal: is like there's a couple little tools that most people can buy. It's really simple. Like for example, I cut down on 25% of my email volume by getting a self-scheduling tool. So like Calendly, Schedule Once, Chili Piper, there's a bunch of them out there. And all it does is it allows somebody to click a link and see my calendar and pick the date that works for them, or I can suggest dates that they can pick. That sounds like a simple tool, but literally the back and forth, oh, Monday, can you meet on Monday? And then on Monday afternoon, you get the email, no, I can't, now my Monday's blown. I can meet on Wednesday, and then you're busy and you get packed on Tuesday night. Hey, I can do Wednesday. Oh, that kind of back and forth just kills deals and slows everything down.
And so I use Calendly. You'll send this from booking the podcast and the recordings that we do. And I see it. I see it done not even as a selfish thing. I see it as it gives you the opportunity to pick a time that's convenient for you without you having to go through all this nonsense as well. So there's a value add for the person that you're prospecting or speaking to on that front as well.
There's some people that don't like it, but to me, it's all of like how your gentlemanly skills. Like for me, I'll say, hey, here's a link if you want to link it. Here's 2 dates I'm suggesting. And if you don't like to use a self-scheduling tool, just send me a couple of dates and I'll tell you what works. So you give them the option. But the thing is 95% of the people view it as a convenience. If I have a chance to book on a self-scheduler, I do it every time because it's easier for me. So that would be like some oil that you can put in the mix. Shared calendars. So for example, if you're a prospector booking for a closer, or if you're a closer that needs to get a technical person involved in the sale, we use Chili Piper for that. They allow us to see multiple other people's calendars, but also when they're available. And then we can book stuff right on there with the customer on the phone all at the same time. So it just is a simpler system to be able to like get, when you have to draw in multiple resources and coordinate a bunch of calendars at one time, it can help you do that.
Sure.
But those are some of the things that like help with the oil of the machine. Yeah.
Love it. And I want to just wrap up with this, Mark. I want to give context to the audience of, yourself again as a practitioner on this. Say, and I'll give context for myself. I worked for the company I mentioned earlier on. They essentially invented endoscopic surgery. They are $1 billion company. They're privately owned, which affects some of this. But they did not have a CRM system.
Right.
They had nothing. We had a monthly spreadsheet that went around a team of, just in the UK, 100 odd sales reps. And this clearly then one bit of data in the beginning of that gets the whole thing messed up on the end of it. You try and open it, it's too big, the actual file, because of the crappy laptops that we had. So for someone in that scenario, how much, not necessarily even financially, but what's the upside of someone investing into some of these products out of their own wages, out of their own pay? Is there an upside that's big enough that they're going to, is it a needle mover on their commissions if they do that? Is there going to be a positive return on investment for them?
So this is what we found is if you, first of all, just start using a process every time, you're going to see a 20% lift. If you marry that process with great fuel, we can usually see a 2 to 3x increase in your sales activity. So right now, if you're doing 20 phone calls a day and sending out a dozen emails, I can take that 30 and I can make it 100 literally within 2 weeks. And so if you are the type of salesperson that believes more activity leads to more results, and you're good in front of people and have great conversations and can turn that extra activity into like extra pipeline, then I would say that you could easily expect a 2x increase in your results because you're going to be doing 2 to 3x the amount of activity. And so I know that sounds like a bold claim, but like it's like a pneumatic nailer versus a hammer. If I hire a carpenter and he comes to this job site with a hammer, like, dude, you're not getting done in 2 weeks, like you said. But if he comes out with his air hoses and his compressors and he's up there and it sounds like machine guns, I know that thing's getting done. And so for a sales rep, like, why work with a hammer? Like, typing one-off emails in Outlook is hammer. Sending somebody, hey, do you want to meet at noon tomorrow? Hammer. Going into your CRM and being like, I know this data sucks. But I don't know where to go to get anybody. Let me email this guy that I talked to one time and ask him what the VP is. That's working with a hammer, man. Like you're not going to build the house as fast if you're working with a hammer. Like you need tools are empower people. That's what separates us from animals. If you want to be an animal sales guy,
Love
like
it.
keep using the hammer and the stick that you're putting into the log to get the ants out. Like, there's a better way to work now.
And just again, to drill down into the context of this, so I just want to leverage your time here as a practitioner versus someone who wrote a book 20 years ago and is keynote speaking on the back of that. What does that say to you as a sales leader in an organization if one of your team they're crushing it? Clearly, they're not using all these tools to procrastinate, which is a potential problem perhaps. But they're crushing it, and they're using these tools, and they're the ones bringing the tools to the table. How does that look internally from you? Kind of like, not I was going to say looking down on them as this VP of sales. That's not what I mean. How does this look from you in the hierarchy of the management team, looking at them? How does that change their perceptions internally?
You mean the perception, like my perception of them as a salesperson, or are you asking me?
Do you value that?
Well, so for me, I only care about like one thing. I want to win. Like, and I don't care if it's me or the janitor or like the newest sales guy or my best sales guy. Like, I just want the best idea and I want to test it. And if it works, I want everybody to do that. Like, I just don't care where the idea comes from. I'm not smart enough to like figure out how to win every deal and how to make everybody a better salesperson. But what I am really good at is I listen to everyone and I take their input, and then I take that input and I test it. And if it works out, then I'll show everybody else how to do it. That's like my strength. My first sales job, they called me Steel Trap, because I would go sit with the best guys, and then I would listen to their thing, and then I would buy them all coffee the next morning, one-on-one, and I would ask the questions I needed to ask. Because when I was sitting around a table of top performers, like I don't deserve to talk, and I'm not talking. I'm just listening. And then I'll have like an individual session with them where I'd sit down and buy them coffee, and I would ask all the questions I had about what they taught me. And then I would come back the next year, and I would go from like the 150 best sales guy to the 30th best. And people would say, well, how do you do it? Well, all I did is I listened to Joe, and I listened to Renee, and I listened to Dick, and I listened to, John over there, and they told me what to do. I just did what they did. And so to me, like a sales guy that's got it figured out is a chance for a sales leader to say, what are you doing? And then these tools can help you put that process on rails so that everybody can do it. And so to me, that's like the beauty of being a sales leader is, if you got to sit around and come up with everything, that means you're hiring the wrong salespeople. Your salespeople should be beating down your door with awesome ideas of what's killing it for them and how they want all their buddies to kill it the same way. And so, it's kind of cultural, right? If you're not that kind of leader, it's going to be tough. And we've definitely come across situations where a rep was killing it with our tool, went to his leader, and it threatened his leader. And that's just if you work for somebody like that, like leave now.
Yeah.
Because you're not going anywhere. The money's not worth it. Like go get somewhere where you can have some input and work for a leader that cares about winning. You winning, not them winning.
Love it.
I win when my reps win. You know what I mean? Like I make more money when they make more money. Like I'm gonna just do whatever they tell me to do. That sounds good. We'll test it to make sure it works. But if we test it, we're rolling it out. So
amazing stuff. Well, Mark, I've got one final question, mate.
Yeah.
Something I ask everyone that comes on the show, and that is, if you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give him to help him become better at selling?
Ooh. So I think it took me about 5 or 6 years to really understand the power of questioning. And so I have like a little personal formula for the success of sales, which is effort, which is like if I got to make 100 phone calls today and it's 6 p.m. and I've only made 85 and I know nobody's in the office, am I going to still call 15, make 15 dials and leave 15 voicemails, or am I not? And so like effort, then plus curiosity. And curiosity is two things. It's internal curiosity about your product. Like, are you curious like why they designed it this way, or how it works this way, or why it's better than your competitors? And there's external curiosity, which is, what is your problem? Do I really care about you? Can I really fix your problem, or can I not, right? So you combine that internal and external curiosity, and you do the third thing, which is you make a connection. I think people, maybe it's technology, I don't know what it is, maybe it's all the weird food we eat, but like people can't make connections anymore. I could say, listen, your light is out. This light bulb will turn the light back on in your thing, and people won't make the connection if I don't explicitly put the light bulb into the socket for them, right? So I think that, if you can do those three things, if you can have effort and you can have curiosity, and then you can help make connections, you'll be successful. So I would tell my younger self, be more curious. Like, don't ask questions just for the sake of getting the data or checking a box. Ask a question. The Bible says seek to understand. And that's what I try to do. I like seek to understand put myself in their shoes and understand it. And if I could have done that quicker, I would have made a lot more money sooner.
I love it. I think this idea of curiosity and just being interested
Yeah.
in your industry. I know with myself, I chose medical devices because my girlfriend's a doctor, my mum was a pharmacy tech, my brother's a pharmacist, and my auntie is a nurse. I was so wrapped up within the world of the NHS that I knew a little bit about surgical procedures. But I think I would struggle in perhaps inside sales with a software product because I don't have that level of, and obviously this depends on the product service, and I appreciate all that, but I have to be tactile, I have to be there, it's so exciting to me to be looking inside a patient as they're being operated. There's the bits and guts and other being put on the side as they're cutting through it. All that fascinated me, so I was really happy to be curious and to ask questions. And then as soon as you start asking a surgeon a question, they like teaching. That's kind of ingrained into them from a young age through medical school. So that's how I built rapport with them. But it was all natural. There was no weirdness going on. I wasn't asking questions or trying to put across that I was interested or curious. I genuinely was. So I think you're spot on with that of if your manager doesn't care, they're not excited about you and your success, which is kind of what you alluded to before. And if you're not curious about the industry, perhaps it's time for a change. So I appreciate that. So with that, tell us a little bit about Outreach and where we can find out more about you and everything you're doing over there.
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn. That's the best way to get a hold of me. I have a completely stupid profile picture, so the little background behind your thing. So go see how dumb I am. And then what Outreach is again, Outreach is the system of action for salespeople. It takes the leads and the contacts that you need to get a hold of, and it helps you manage your communication so that you get more meetings. And no matter what anybody says, there's one thing that is like the grease for all of business, and that's a meeting. Like if you need to close a deal, you got to have a meeting. If you need to start a deal, you need to have a meeting. If you need to get a security review done for a technology product, you got to have a meeting. And so, we view that empowering salespeople to get the meetings that they need to get faster and better will make everything easier. And so the Outreach is a system of action that can help you do that.
Amazing stuff. Where can we find it? Share the URL.
Outreach.io.
Amazing stuff. Well, I'll link to that in the show notes of this episode over at salesmanpodcast.com. And with that, Mark, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for, again, the practical elements of all of this from a practitioner's perspective. I appreciate that, and I know the audience value that as well. That has weight when someone like you comes in and says all this. So I appreciate that. And I want to thank you for joining us on the Salesman Podcast.
Thanks for having me, man. Nice to meet you.